musical sources in the Moho missions. The purpose of this overview is to introduce the collection of music kept in the missionary archives of Moxos, San Ignacio de Moxos, Bolivia. However, since music in the previous centuries circulated among missions and cities, it will be necessary to also refer to the other repositories of historic music in Bolivia, in particular to the collection of music in Chiquitos kept in Concepcion, and also to the collection of music from the Bolivian National Archives and Library in Sucre. The foundation of the musical archive in Moho was a gradual action. For the local church, in particular for the several missionaries and catechists working in the area, it was a well-known fact that the music was kept in the area by the local maestro de capilla and also by the local choirs that still existed and exist in the area. The first musicologist who learned about the collection was Samuel Claro. His studies covered only a part, maybe no more than 15% of what the same collection is today. In 1991, the Apostolic Vicariate in Beni called all the musicians in the area into a gathering in Trinidad and asked them to bring along copies of music used for their religious meetings today. It was then when they became aware of the magnitude of the historic music circulating in the area. The Jesuit missionary Enrique Jorda located the most important and voluminous collections, that of Nemesio Guaji and that of Primitivo Guaji, which is a good part, managed to transfer this music to San Ignacio. The archives were founded on the 30th of July in 2003, when, who is speaking, convinced the musicians of the Coro Musical of San Ignacio de Moxos to donate this manuscript to the archives. The material gathered in the archives is a proof of the music that circulated in the eastern area of Bolivia, called Moxos, in the time-space covering the arrival of the Jesuit missionaries in the area, more or less 1680, until the very present day. The music itself is of sacred character, with very few examples of secular music, and it was used to enrich the religious services of the inhabitants in the area. Something about historic music in Bolivia. The collections of historic music in Bolivia may be grouped in at least three major fields. First, music coming from the cathedrals in Bolivia. We have music in Bolivia of, in these founds, plain songs, vocal polyphony, instrumental music, and also printed music. The second sector would be music that comes from the monasteries, from convents. And again, we have to refer to plain songs, to polyphony, instrumental music, and printed music. And the third one is a music that comes from the missions, and this is typically Bolivian phenomena. No other country preserved what was found, first preserved and then found in Bolivia. Historic music in Bolivia is so voluminous and assorted that the greatest part of the music from the West could be taught from what there is in the country. A little bit about the catalogue which was already referred to by Professor Weissman. The catalogue of the handwritten music in Mochos is not only about music itself, but it speaks also about the context and has its complement in 3 more works which were part of the same studies or study project in the archives of Mochos, namely Catalogue of Missionaries in Mochos, drafted by Javier Matienzo, then the Catalogue of Copyists and Handwritten Music, drafted by Ana Luisa Arce, and then initial Catalogue of Doctrinal Books, and it was studies done by Victor Rondon. And there was also a short history written by Robert Tomicha Charupa. He is from the Chiquito Indians community, historian, with his doctorate obtained at the La Universidad Gregoriana in Italy. A short description of the archives in Mochos. The music repertoire gathered in the missionary archives of Mochos has been built upon 4 pillars or columns. The first one, and probably the most important one, is Music of San Ignacio de Mochos, the collection which was first described by Samuel Claro. Second one is the Music of Trinidad, which was a former Jesuit mission, today a major city in Bolivia. Trinidad, which was taken to San Lorenzo and copied for several communities in the 20th century that were founded in this part of Bolivia. So when the Indians escaped from Trinidad and had only a few hours to decide what they have to take with them, what would really define about their cultural and religious identity, they took with them the manuscript, the musical manuscript and violins, and this was what circulated in the area. The third one is a corpus of villancicos that were brought to Mochos after the expulsion of the Jesuits, but no later than 1850, and their place of origin seems to be one of the Andean cathedrals in Bolivia or Peru. And finally, the number 4 pillar, music that came to be part of the collection in a period of time that extends from the last decades of the 19th century until the end of the 20th century. And interestingly enough, here what you have in Mochos is a national anthem of Argentina with all 9 verses. And I believe this is one of the oldest copies of the national anthem in Latin America. So this is the 4th pillar. Let us say something about physical condition of the manuscript in Mochos. Today we have 702,000 pages. Up to the present date, the musical collection of the missionary archives in Mochos has approximately 7,200 folios. It is complemented by another collection, mainly 137 books or manuscripts of individual use having text and music, usually one voice, sometimes with the violin part, music that accompanied several ritual, liturgical, and para-liturgical meetings, mainly in the space of time after the expulsion, 19th and 20th century, until the present. The physical condition of the musical manuscript varies considerably from folio to folio. A great part of the musical collection is legible and does not show great complications in its reading. However, there is also folios that are so delicate that any physical contact puts its integrity to risk. And this is music by Domenico Zipoli, copied by local copyists on June the 8th, 1918. This is Domenico Zipoli. A couple of words about historical surrounding of the collection to understand this. The Jesuit missionaries used the music as an instrument of evangelization of the local people. There was no mission without music. In each mission, there was a capilla musical with 30 to 40 professional musicians who learned music with the local maestro de capilla, always an Indian. When we talk about the music from the missions, in my opinion, we have to talk also about a very special action that was performed, as to say appropriation of this music by the local musicians, and also about the perseverance. It is evident that at least to me, it is evident that the local people considered this music as their own and appropriated this repertoire, which helped in its conservation, and they kept it despite the fact that the missionaries no longer lived among the indigenous people, and the solemn liturgies in the 19th and 20th century were no more than memories from the past. The facts that the indigenous people liked this music, the fact that the new music brought by the missionaries could be adjusted according to their own tastes for sound, the fact that the text in some native languages were applied to such music and to its execution, the fact that sometimes some native instruments were used in their performance, and finally, the fact that this music existed in this area helped in the process of appropriation. However, what was essential in my interpretation was the fact that the indigenous people understood it and mastered as their own, and felt that this music came from God and had the power to guide their minds and the hearts of humans toward their creator. This is my interpretation. Then, what we can see that this music was copied very early in the 18th century and all to the 19th century, and the last copy of this music dates 2005. And in 2005, we brought all of this music to one space. And a year or 2 years later, I visit the same communities and speak to the local people. When we brought this music to the archives, we left a Xerox copy. A year later, I go to the same village and I see that from the Xerox copy, they make a new copy of this music. And I ask them, why are you doing this? We could provide more Xerox copies for you. And the answer is, how to praise God with Xerox copy. We have lost this long ago. Yeah? And this is a map, the way this music in Moxos migrated from Trinidad to San Lorenzo. And then when new communities were founded in the 19th or 20th century, even 1970, they would not understand themselves without this music. They would go to San Lorenzo and copy this music, even if a newly founded community did not have at this moment capilla musical. It's something really that has to be expressed, and something that has to be given also a closer look. Then, treasures of the music collections in Moxos. There are several texts written by the missionaries and visitors to the Jesuit music, to the Jesuit, from the Jesuit redactions. And one of the biggest treasures is that in this collection, we have at least 3 operas. We knew, and it was Bernardo Ilari together with Professor Weissman, who called our attention. There is a sacred opera, San Ignacio. But we, from the music collections in Moxos today, can say that San Ignacio was probably preceded by the opera called San Lorenzo, with text in Latin. When the bishop, or a high-rank official, church official, would visit the missions, they would sing an opera not in local language, but in Latin, the language that was understood by the authorities. The same opera which we have in Ignacio, we have also in Moxos, and Bernardo Ilari, and then I myself, we use all these evidences to reconstruct the work. So this is the second opera. But it was really only recently discovered that even music by Adolf Hasse traveled to the missions in Moxos. And the text was replaced by a sacred text, and what is today Quis me a te sponse separavi is the opera by Hasse Dalisa. And it also is something very revealing to someone like me, and I have spent 25 years studying what was music and evangelization. I was convinced that something so profane and so, oriented into the to show off the ability of the singer and of the instrumentalist would never travel to the missions. Today, I have to change my mind. So this is one of the treasures which we have in Moxos. Something about composers. Obviously, when we talk about music from the missions, Jesuit missions, we talk about the Zipoli. How do we know that it is Zipoli? We don't have a single original. And I believe that music by Zipoli composed in Cordoba is not necessarily identical to music that we have by the same composer, but the copies from the missions. The number of the composer appears as you can see on the top, and it says Zipoli, just Zipoli. We have also music by Giovanni Battista Bassani, but once we have learned that the music, the whole collection of 6 messes, Acroama Missale, that was printed in Italy, once it was brought to the missions, the locals would not just reproduce the way this music was presented in Europe, but would do local arrangements of this music. And each one, if you compare Bassani from Italy, this is one composer. But when you talk about Bassani in the missions, this is still the same background, but the final product is quite different. We have also in these archives music from Sucre. And strangely enough, the original is lost in Sucre, but as you can see here, Misa Araujo, Alto de Quaresma, 2 of his messes that was not known to us who do research in Bolivia, of the most famous Maestro de Capilla in Sucre, Juan de Araujo, were found in the missions. Moxos collection gave us also insight about music by Jan Josef Ignaz Brentner, who also, his music traveled to Bolivia, and it is Bassani and Brentner, probably what I would say at this moment of my research, the top of development of the Baroque music in the missions. You would have Hasse, Brentner, and Bassani. This is what I would say at this moment of the research. We have music also by Antonio Vivaldi, which is Moxos. In Moxos is called Principal Concerto. Is it enough, this title, to propose that Vivaldi was a principal composer when we refer to the instrumental music? Well, I don't know. But again, when it is Vivaldi, it shows us the way the locals behave when the music traveled to the missions. The first movement is a new arrangement of the same music by Vivaldi, and the third one too. The second one was replaced by a music by someone else. We still don't know who would be the composer of the second movement of the same. So when we say Zipoli, when we say Brentner, when we say Araujo, again, we have to say about Italy, we have to think about Brentner in Bohemia or Bassani in Italy, but not necessarily is the same what it comes from the missions, Vivaldi. But what is the most characteristic of the Moho missions, it is also, referred to the local influence on the Baroque or post-Baroque music, which is a part of the collection. Here is the only example that the local machetero dance was written also on pentagramma, on the musical staff, and it was done in 1895, as you can see on the lower part of this manuscript. This is still, a very professional copyist who made this musical notation. So when we speak about the local influence on the Baroque music in the missions, it's not only the text in local languages, but introduction also of some music of the very native sort into the collection. This is Herure, another local dance. Already in the time of the Jesuit presence, when we speak about music in the formal liturgy like Vespers or like the Mass would be obviously in Latin. But it is not that the Latin was imposed upon the locals. The church at that time would impose, the Latin Mass everywhere, all over the world. But when they left the church and when they do the procession, even today, during the procession, they would mix violins and autochthonous instruments in one musical production. Even more, a local dance would be performed in front of the Blessed Sacrament in the processions of Corpus Christi. And I'm not going to repeat, the Professor Weissman already spoke about, the way the catalog was organized. This is, but what is really new is the catalog of copyists. And it is also a very good testimony to understand at least the approach, the understanding of the locals of these musical traditions. Once the Jesuits were expelled from the zone, the locals could get rid of all of this, could go back to the jungle and forget about all this music that came from the time of the missions. But the attitude was just the contrary. As I have shown you before, this music was copied until 2005. And once we took this to the archives today, they made a handwritten copy of the Xerox copy we have left. And then the final word, the professional copyists. It was a very serious business to copy music for the missions. And not only that they had professional musicians, but also professional copyists. And I would like to end with this, what is written here: musical culture from the former Jesuit missions in Bolivia is not only about the past, it is still alive. Thank you very much.